Greetings, I'm Fruitnut, and thanks for stopping by. This is a series that takes a look at what DPS the classes of vanilla WoW could do at specific gear levels. We'll be looking at 3 points in vanilla. Pre-raid gear, which is gear from dungeons and quests, then gear at the end of BWL progression, and finally, the best in slot gear for all of vanilla. Check out the description below for some guidelines I follow on my gear sets, and more specifics on my general testing for this series. I want to test every DPS spec that was available at the time. For this video, we'll be looking at the Ruin Warlock. What is a Ruin Warlock? Well, Ruin refers to the talent in the destruction tree that increases the critical strike damage bonus of your destruction spells by 100%, so your criticals will hit twice as hard. It's a very good talent that had 2 main specs tied to it. One was called SM Ruin, or Shadow Mastery Ruin, and the other was called DS Ruin, or Demonic Sacrifice Ruin. They both focused on getting more damage from your Shadow Bolts, which was your main damage-dealing spell. SM Ruin granted 10% increased damage dealt by shadow spells, and also had the Nightfall talent, which gave your Corruption a 4% chance when it dealt damage to make your next Shadow Bolt instant. It was a great spec for high mobility fights and fights with multiple enemies. The other spec, DS Ruin, granted 15% increased shadow damage for 30 minutes after sacrificing your succubus and performed well in low mobility fights, which just so happens to be what our test is. Which one did more damage? Well, the general census is that DS Ruin did more damage. We'll see what kind of results I was able to get and compare the numbers of both. That means there'll be 2 DPS portions for this video, with results comparing at the end. So, what about the specs? What about destruction and affliction and demonology? Ruin isn't a spec, it's a talent. I know, and I had to figure out how I was going to go about it. These were the bread and butter specs for doing maximum damage in raids while also avoiding to use the limited amount of debuff slots available. I would like to mess around more with the specs and make a video for each one, but for now, we'll see what the more popular talent choices can do. Let's take a look at our gear sets. Warlocks are in the top 3 for my favorite classes in World of Warcraft. They are said to start with low DPS earlier in vanilla and then pick up for later raids compared to other classes. One of the biggest reasons for this is threat. Warlocks have no threat reducing talents or abilities in vanilla. Threat was a very big deal back then, and when a Warlock crit with Shadow Bolt, there was a huge risk of taking threat from the tank, so they had to be very careful and could not go all out. So, in order for the Warlock to be able to do more damage, a tank has to pull more threat, which wouldn't happen until tanks had more gear. So as tanks got more and more gear, and in turn increased their threat generation, the Warlock was able to do more and more damage and not be in risk of pulling threat. Threat was an interesting concept that has been lost to the game over the years, and it's just one of the many reasons I miss old WoW. That being said, threat is not an issue in my tests. There's no way I can pull threat off my tank during testing, so numbers may be a bit skewed. I use a lower rank Shadow Bolt for most of the DPS portion here to conserve mana, as I'm not sure how much life tapping was allowed during a fight, as healers needed to conserve their mana as well, and I've read that it was expected for a Warlock to heal themselves if they needed to life tap. Okay, it's time to see how these specs do. First, we'll start out with the SM Ruin, and then we'll go over to DS Ruin. It's time once again. Here we go. And there we have it. SM Ruin on the left and DS Ruin on the right. In my tests, DS Ruin averaged higher than SM Ruin, which was not surprising at all, as it's best for fights where you can just sit there and use Shadow Bolt over and over and over and over again. The biggest factor, though, was just chance. Sometimes I would get lots of crits and big DPS numbers. Sometimes I wouldn't get a single Nightfall proc the whole 4 minutes. Overall, the DPS numbers are close, and Warlocks can do some great DPS. Warlocks are one of the best classes in vanilla WoW. They excel in PvP, are super useful in PvE, and do great damage. They're one of the easiest and fastest levelers in the game, and even get a free mounted 40. But I could go on about how great Warlocks are, but what do you guys think? Did I make a mistake? Make sure to let me know about every single one of them in the comments below. And if you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. Up next, we'll be taking a look at the Enhancement Shaman. Thanks again for stopping by, and I hope you have a wonderful day.